Welcome back to American Civil War Facts. Today, the last battle of the Civil War. The end of the Civil War came quickly. With the surrender of Lee's and Johnston's armies in April 1865, the fires of rebellion began to go out, starting in the east and spreading westward. Texas, however, remained defiant and continued to fight on for another 35 days, until May 13, 1865, the last battle of the Civil War. Unlike the rest of the Confederacy, the war mostly spared Texas. Aside from a few isolated federal coastal outposts, the Lone Star State remained unoccupied and subjected to nothing more than Union raids to shut cross-border supply lines from Mexico, such as the one at Brownsville, Texas. The Union Army had a post at Brazos Santiago, a barrier island on the Gulf Coast and just 18 miles from Brownsville. The Brazos garrison tried to shut down Brownsville's cross-border operations several times, but with trivial effect. But by the spring of 1865, with Lee's army withering away under Grant's siege at Petersburg, Virginia, and Joe Johnston's army vainly attempting to stop Sherman's march through the bowels of the Deep South, the war was obviously ending. So, the Union commander at Brazos Santiago, Colonel Theodore H. Barrett, decided to send Lieutenant Colonel Branson and the 62nd U.S. Colored Infantry on one more strike 16 miles up the Rio Grande to White's Ranch, where a small band of rebels were based. Though not stated in his official report, Barrett's goal for the raid may have been to obtain horses for the 2nd Texas Cavalry, 52 of whom accompanied Branson on the expedition. May 11, 1865, 4 a.m. Early on the morning of May 11th, Branson was preparing his 250 men to cross from Brazos Santiago Island to the mainland when a fierce storm arose. The storm and mechanical failure of the ferry delayed Branson's departure, and his men were not in position to begin to march to Palmito Ranch till 9:30 that night. Once safely on the mainland, however, his men were quick of foot and reached White's Ranch around 2 a.m. the morning of the 12th. Intending to capture the suspected rebel force of 65 men, horses, and cattle camped there. But the rebels had evacuated the area the day before. Exhausted, Branson marched his men another mile and a half toward Palmito Ranch before camping for the day in a thicket along the Rio Grande. They remained undiscovered till about 8:30 when Mexican nationals spotted them from the far bank, who spread the alarm to the Confederates. Branson immediately charged toward Palmito Ranch, reaching it about noon. After punching through a thin screen of rebel cavalry, Branson captured 3 prisoners, 10 days' rations, a few horses and cattle, and scattered the remaining 190 Confederates that were stationed there. Branson took position on a hill near the ranch to rest and feed his men and animals. The rebels, however, were not about the let the Federals roam about the country at will, so, at 3 p.m., a large rebel force appeared and began skirmishing with Branson's troops. Considering his position indefensible, Branson and the 62nd fell back to White's Ranch for the night. Taking defensive positions, Branson dispatched the day's haul back to Brazos Santiago, along with a call for reinforcements from Colonel Barrett. Cole Barrett arrived at White's Ranch early the next morning with 200 additional troops of the 34th Indiana Infantry, took command of all the Union troops and headed back to Palmito Ranch, skirmishing with rebel troops all the way, capturing the ranch. Again, Barrett set fire to the Confederate barracks buildings. Barrett continued the advance 2 miles past Palmito when a sharp fight ensued. Brought to a halt by rebel resistance and with night coming on, Barrett fell back a mile to a bluff on the river intending to rest for the night. The rebels, however, were not inclined to let them settle down before dark without a fight. About 4 p.m., a large force of Confederate cavalry, supported by a battery of field artillery, arrived and managed to sneak around Barrett's right flank, his left resting on the river, and threatened to get into his rear and cut him off from Brazos Santiago. With no artillery of his own, Barrett had no choice but retreat or capture. Under heavy fire from his front and 250 enemy cavalry trying to turn his right, Barrett threw out a line of skirmishers to slow down the rebels and keep an escape route open. The Federal force fought to keep the rebel cavalry from cutting them off as they made their way back down the river the way they had come. Retreating under fire is one of the most difficult moves to make in warfare, but Barrett managed to extricate his force, arriving back at Brazos Santiago the morning of the 14th of May, but lost 48 men of the 34th Indiana, who were cut off and captured while keeping the rebels at bay. The Battle of Palmito Ranch would turn out to be the last battle of the war, as word of Lee's surrender over a month previously finally reached the isolated Union outpost. After 4 deadly years of war, the 62nd U.S. Colored Infantry fired the last volley of the Civil War about sunset on the 13th of May, 1865. Barrett's wounded and captured in the engagement was 4 officers and 111 men. Only 1 man was killed on either side, Private John J. Williams of Company B, 34th Indiana, the last man to die in the Civil War. Thank you for watching. I hope you'll hit the like button below and subscribe for more American Civil War facts.